Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University. Welcome to another weekly study. And today wanted to go over in this video a question that a student had posted on one of the quizzes, I believe it was, and I'm gonna show you what it is real quick. And it relates to chapter 23, last chapter in the textbook. And basically it's about arthritis. So it's going to be referenced in table 2318, and that's on page 787. So I just wanted to give you a little heads up. It's a great question. And this is what we really like to see is when you get a question or you have some issue with some material in a book, literally post a question like this student did. It's so much easier to see. I actually grabbed a screenshot of it, and I want to show it to you. The question was, which statement is an accurate reflection of exercise and physical activity as it relates to arthritis? And then, of course, you've got your four answers. And this student answered, physical activity tends to aggravate arthritic symptoms. So it's a really good question. And of course, this individual's question is as well, why did I get this correct? And the post says the correct answer does not relate to arthritis. However, the question is asking. Well, that's what I wanted to help you with, because remember, when all is said and done, the idea is that you got to be able to answer questions on the exam. And some of the questions, well, I would say a fair amount of the questions can just seem bizarre, odd. I've seen the term unfair, that's not worded correctly. By the way, I'm with you on a lot of the questions that are posted where a student basically says, I don't get it. This question doesn't make sense. It could have been worded better. And I'm going to absolutely agree with you. There are a number of questions that I look at and I go, that's not a really well worded question. It's very easy to see why somebody would get it wrong. But I thought it was a great idea to go ahead, pull this up, show it to you, and help you to navigate through a question like this. Now, remember, anytime you're doing practice exams, quizzes, your goal is not to necessarily get this stuff right. And it's not necessary to try and pass a practice exam. You're not getting graded on a practice exam. This is a great example of exactly what practice exams, quizzes, and questions are designed for. So when you're taking a test, when you're taking a quiz, don't worry about whether you get the question right or wrong. That's the whole point, is that now you have an opportunity to go back in, and in this case, accurate reflection of exercise relates to arthritis. In this case, now you can go back to chapter 23 and actually look in this chapter, and again, in this particular table, and now you can see why the correct answer is B. Cardiorespiratory training should begin at a low to moderate intensity, 40 to 65% max heart rate. So there's nothing wrong with the question. The question is absolutely fine. And that's why I want to refer you back. The goal here, this is the tip. This is what the video is designed for, is to give you this tip to help you to understand. It's not about the question. Take the question, look at it, look at the responses, and then refer back to that particular area of the textbook. Now, remember, you got to have a textbook. Either, look, and I got a physical one. I've also got the actual one on the a digital copy of it. Irrespective, go to table 23.8 and have a look down here. It says basic exercise guidelines for individuals with arthritis. And guess what you're going to see? Mode, frequency, intensity, duration, assessment, flexibility, resistance training, special considerations. Keep in mind, the mode, that's the type of exercise. That's why you got to memorize some of these charts. Frequency is number of days per week, 3 to 5 days per week, but that's not what this question is referring to. This question is going to relate to physical activity, i.e. cardiovascular training, more than likely, because it would say resistance training. So the answer is B, because all you got to do now is look at intensity. And that's where the answer is. Now, the intensity here says low to moderate intensity, 40%, see here, 40 to 60, it says it right there, 40 to 65% max heart rate, and progress as tolerated, depending on the client's capabilities. That's the answer to the question. So there's nothing in this section of chapter 23 that says anything about physical activity tends to aggravate arthritic symptoms. In fact, it could actually be helpful. Now, obviously, heavy resistance training could be problematic. But the point is that when you're looking at a question like this, which statement is an accurate reflection of exercise physical activity as it relates to arthritis, immediately that's going to take you to chapter 23, and then you would move through the chapter and find this section on arthritis. Remember, I've said this in any of the chapter level studies that we've done. Certain chapters are loaded with tables, and that's generally where the information that you're going to need is going to be found. And I would generally say that in this chapter, your goal is to, quote, memorize the table. And I'm not going to get into how to deal with that in this particular video, because it's really not that difficult. All these tables, for the most part, say the same thing with respect to, for instance, frequency and intensity. But in this case, with arthritis, in a question like this, the goal here, and this is, again, the tip, the goal here is to look at the information. If you got it wrong, okay, they already gave you the correct answer. Well, why is that the correct answer? Well, go back to the chapter and the section that speaks to arthritis. I love these type of posts because for the most part, they direct us right to the information where it can be found. Remember, it's not relevant, whether the question seems like it's effective questioning or proper questioning, or doesn't even matter if it's correct, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not saying it's not, but it's their test and it's their questions. And the best thing to do is what this student did, which is post it. I don't understand what this is saying or how I could get this wrong. Well, the answer is just like any other question. That's why you've got practice quizzes and practice tests. Every question you get wrong, take your time, look at it, and then go back in there. And in this case, when it comes to arthritis, again, you're on page 787. All you got to do is look intensity, low to moderate intensity, and progress as tolerated, depending on the client's capabilities. But there is your answer. Let me just go real quick again to look at these other answers. So you've got four possible answers. Physical activity tends to aggravate arthritic symptoms. Well, that's a possibility. I guess you would imagine that that's a possibility. So we'll leave that up for discussion. But if you had read the table and kind of remembered a little bit about what table 23.8 said, this one would have jumped right out at you. Cardio training should begin at a low to moderate intensity, 40 to 65%. If you had done the table, read it, rewrote it a bunch of times, more than likely it would have jogged your memory. C, plyometric training alleviate. Okay, well, that's blatantly incorrect. In fact, plyometric training is generally contraindicated. So that's a no-go. D, high intensity resistance training is appropriate to, well, again, C, high intensity. That's a C and D are obviously incorrect answers. So now you've got a 50-50 chance. Like I say, if you had gone through and spent a little bit of time on these tables, you would understand that people with arthritis, there's no issues with doing resistance training, but the general understanding is that the resistance training needs to be done in accordance with what they're capable of doing, and it's generally going to be low intensity resistance for that type of scenario. And then in this case, because they're just saying physical activity, generally you're going to be looking at something probably related to the cardiorespiratory type of training, which is located on those first a couple of rows. So mode, frequency, intensity, duration, right? And so there it is under the intensity, low to moderate intensity. That's basically your answer. Now, again, your goal with this is to understand that you're going to see a fair amount of questions like this. Your goal from a test taking perspective, practice test taking perspective, is take your time, go through it, understand why you got it incorrect. And in this case, if you got it incorrect, it's generally because you did not spend enough time looking at these tables. Great. This was a great post. I'm so glad the student did that. It gives us an opportunity to kill a couple of birds with one stone. First off, specifically about arthritis. Okay, so there's your intensity guidelines. More importantly, from a more general perspective, when it comes to practice exams and quizzes, your goal, nobody cares if you, quote, pass a quiz with an 80. That's not relevant. In fact, if you got an 80, you're still not going to worry about the answers you got correct anyway. Your goal is to hone in and focus on the incorrect responses. Perfect example to go now in there, go back to chapter 23. This student can now kind of reread through and go, okay, maybe I need to spend a little bit more time on the tables. That's the whole point. One of the things we tell students is take lots of practice exams. Try and get as many questions, practice questions in as possible. And please don't think that any of the questions on the actual NASM exam are going to look anything like those questions. It's going to be the same material. I would be really surprised if you saw a question on the NASM, the actual exam, that said anything close to what that question asked. It would probably say something more like, you have a client with rheumatoid arthritis. Which would be the best resistance training programming, to start them off with? Something like that. Well, by the way, just like this question, you would have had to have spent a little bit of time in table 2318 to know that resistance training, 1 to 3 sets of 10 to 12 reps, 2 to 3 days per week. There's nothing outside the norm there, is there? No, the arthritis is very similar. And I've gone through this on other videos where I literally went into chapter 23 and showed the different tables. I'll give you a great example before we end. Resistance training for arthritis, 1 to 3 sets of 10 to 12 reps, 2 to 3 days per week. I move over to page 784 and I look at table 2316 for osteoporosis. And what do I see for resistance training? 1 to 3 sets of 8 to 20 repetitions, 2 to 3 days per week. Little tip here. There's no difference between a person with osteoporosis and a person with arthritis when it comes to resistance training. Other than that, yeah, you can use circuit or PHA training system for arthritis. Look, I hope you understand the goal here was to take a question, good question, that appears to be, a little challenging, and now isolate it and kind of look at it and go back to where where the information is spoken about in the textbook to help you to navigate through all those other questions that you get incorrect. Look, if I can get you to do one thing when it comes to these practice exams and these practice quizzes, look at your incorrect responses and know why you got them. If you know why you got it wrong, if after studying it, you can go, aha, now I get it. Now I get it. Guess what you're going to be able to do in the actual exam. It's really important. I hope this was helpful. Quite often we try to give you some general tips and general information on how to study. And this is clearly one of those scenarios. I thought it was a really good, pertinent post, and I hope it was helpful. So as always, if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, please go ahead and subscribe and make sure you hit the bell so you can get the notifications for when all of the new videos are coming out. If you have comments or you need more information, that's what the comment section is all about. If you do need even more assistance, click on the link inside the description to connect you to Body Design University itself. Our goal is to help you to pass the NASM exam on the first attempt or at whatever attempt you're on. Please, please let us know how we can help and assist you as well. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.